which make men remember. By Jack London. Fortune La Pearle crushed his way through the snow, sobbing, straining, cursing his luck, Alaska, gnome, the cards, and the man who had felt his knife. The hot blood was freezing on his hands and the scene yet bright in his eyes. The man clutching the table and sinking slowly to the floor. The rolling counters and the scattered deck. The swift shiver throughout the room and the pause. The gamekeepers no longer calling, and the clatter of the chips dying away. The startled faces, the infinite instant of silence. And then the great blood roar and the tide of vengeance which lapped his heels and turned the town mad behind him. All hell's broke loose, he sneered, turning aside in the darkness and heading for the beach. Lights were flashing from open doors, and tent, cabin, and dance hall let slip their denizens upon the chase. The clamor of men and howling of dogs smote his ears and quickened his feet. He ran on and on. The sounds grew dim, and the pursuit dissipated itself in vain rage and aimless groping. But a flitting shadow clung to him. Head thrust over shoulder, he caught glimpses of it, now taking vague shape on an open expanse of snow, how merging into the deeper shadows of some darkened cabin or beach-listed craft. Fortune La Pearle swore like a woman, weakly, with the hint of tears that comes of exhaustion, and plunged deeper into the maze of heaped ice, tents, and prospect holes. He stumbled over taut hawsers and piles of dunnage, tripped on crazy guy ropes and insanely planted pegs, and fell again and again upon frozen dumps and mounds of hoarded driftwood. At times, when he deemed he had drawn clear, his head dizzy with the painful pounding of his heart and the suffocating intake of his breath, he slackened down, and ever the shadow leaped out of the gloom and forced him on in heartbreaking flight. A swift intuition lashed upon him, leaving in its trail the cold chill of superstition. The persistence of the shadow he invested with his gambler's symbolism. Silent, inexorable, not to be shaken off, he took it as the fate which waited at the last turn when chips were cashed in and gains and losses counted up. Fortune La Pearle believed in those rare, illuminating moments, when the intelligence flung from it time and space, to rise naked through eternity and read the facts of life from the open book of chance. That this was such a moment he had no doubt, and when he turned inland and sped across the snow-covered tundra, he was not startled because the shadow took upon it greater definiteness and drew in closer. Oppressed with his own impotence, he halted in the midst of the white waste and whirled about. His right hand slipped from its mitten, and a revolver at level glistened in the pale light of the stars. "Don't shoot. I haven't a gun." The shadow had assumed tangible shape, and at the sound of its human voice a trepidation affected Fortune La Pearle's knees, and his stomach was stricken with the qualms of sudden relief. Perhaps things fell out differently because Yuri Bram had no gun that night when he sat on the hard benches of the El Dorado and saw murder done. To that fact also might be attributed the trip on the long trail which he took subsequently with a most unlikely comrade. But be it as it may, he repeated a second time, "Don't shoot. Can't you see I haven't a gun?" "Then what the flaming hell did you take after me for?" demanded the gambler, lowering his revolver. Yuri Bram shrugged his shoulders. "It don't matter much anyhow. I want you to come with me." "Where?" "To my shack, over on the edge of the camp." But Fortune La Pearle drove the heel of his moccasin into the snow and attested by his various deities to the madness of Yuri Bram. "Who are you?" he perorated. "And what am I, that I should put my neck into the rope at your bidding?" "I am Yuri Bram," the other said simply, "and my shack is over there on the edge of camp. I don't know who you are, but you've thrust the soul from a living man's body. There's the blood red on your sleeve, and like a second Cain, the hand of all mankind is against you, and there is no place you may lay your head. Now I have a shack." "For the love of your mother, hold your say, man," interrupted Fortune La Pearle, "or I'll make you a second Abel for the joy of it. So help me I will. With 1,000 men to lay me by the heels, looking high and low, what do I want with your shack? I want to get out of here away. 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 Curse swine. I've half a mind to go back and run amok, and settle for a few of them, the pigs. One gorgeous, glorious fight, and end the whole damn business. It's a skin game, that's what life is, and I'm sick of it." He stopped, appalled, crushed by his great desolation, and Yuri Bram seized the moment. He was not given to speech, this man, and that which followed was the longest in his life, save one long afterward in another place. That's why I told you about my shack. I can stow you there so they'll never find you, and I've got grub in plenty. Elsewise you can't get away. No dogs, no nothing, the sea closed, St. Michael the nearest post, runners to carry the news before you. The same over the portage to Anvik, not a chance in the world for you. Now wait with me till it blows over. They'll forget all about you in a month or less, what of stampeding to York and what not, and you can hit the trail under their noses and they won't bother. I've got my own ideas of justice. When I ran after you out of the El Dorado and along the beach, it wasn't to catch you or give you up. My ideas are my own, and that's not one of them. He ceased as the murderer drew a prayer book from his pocket. With the aurora borealis glimmering yellow in the northeast, heads bared to the frost and naked hands grasping the sacred book, Fortune La Pearle swore him to the words he had spoken, an oath which Yuri Bram never intended breaking, and never broke. At the door of the shack the gambler hesitated for an instant, marveling at the strangeness of this man who had befriended him, and doubting. But by the candlelight he found the cabin comfortable and without occupants, and he was quickly rolling a cigarette while the other man made coffee. His muscles relaxed in the warmth and he lay back with half-assumed indolence, intently studying Yuri's face through the curling wisps of smoke. It was a powerful face, but its strength was of that peculiar sort which stands girt in and unrelated. The seams were deep graven, more like scars, while the stern features were in no way softened by hints of sympathy or humor. Under prominent bushy brows the eyes shone cold and gray. The cheekbones, high and forbidding, were undermined by deep hollows. The chin and jaw displayed a steadiness of purpose which the narrow forehead advertised as single, and, if needs be, pitiless. Everything was harsh: the nose, the lips, the voice, the lines about the mouth. It was the face of one who communed much with himself, unused to seeking counsel from the world, the face of one who wrestled oft of nights with angels, and rose to face the day with shut lips that no man might know. He was narrow but deep, and Fortune, his own humanity broad and shallow, could make nothing of him. Did Yuri sing when merry and sigh when sad? He could have understood, but as it was, the cryptic features were undecipherable. He could not measure the soul they concealed. "Lend a hand, Mr. Man," Yuri ordered when the cups had been emptied. "We've got to fix up for visitors." Fortune purred his name for the other's benefit, and assisted understandingly. The bunk was built against a side and end of the cabin. It was a rude affair, the bottom being composed of driftwood logs overlaid with moss. At the foot the rough ends of these timbers projected in an uneven row. From the side next the wall Yuri ripped back the moss and removed 3 of the logs. The jagged ends he sawed off and replaced so that the projecting row remained unbroken. Fortune carried in sacks of flour from the cache and piled them on the floor beneath the aperture. On these Yuri laid a pair of long sea bags, and over all spread several thicknesses of moss and blankets. Upon this Fortune could lie, with the sleeping fur stretching over him from one side of the bunk to the other, and all men could look upon it and declare it empty. In the weeks which followed, several domiciliary visits were paid, not a shack or tent in Nome escaping, but Fortune lay in his cranny undisturbed. In fact, little attention was given to Yuri Bram's cabin, for it was the last place under the sun to expect to find the murderer of John Randolph. Except during such interruptions, Fortune lolled about the cabin, playing long games of solitaire and smoking endless cigarettes. Though his volatile nature loved geniality and play of words and laughter, he quickly accommodated himself to Yuri's taciturnity. Beyond the actions and plans of his pursuers, the state of the trails, and the price of dogs, they never talked, and these things were only discussed at rare intervals and briefly. But Fortune fell to working out a system, and hour after hour and day after day, he shuffled and dealt, noted the combinations of the cards in long columns, and shuffled and dealt again. Toward the end even this absorption failed him, and head bowed upon the table, he visioned the lively all-night houses of Nome, where the gamekeepers and lookouts worked in shifts and the clattering roulette ball never slept. At such times his loneliness and bankruptcy stunned him till he sat for hours in the same unblinking, unchanging position. At other times, his long-pent bitterness found voice in passionate outbursts, for he had rubbed the world the wrong way and did not like the feel of it. "Life's a skin game," he was fond of repeating, and on this one note he rang the changes. "I never had half a chance," he complained. "I was faked in my birth and flim-flammed with my mother's milk. The dice were loaded when she tossed the box, and I was born to prove the loss. But that was no reason she should blame me for it, and look on me as a cold deck. But she did as she did. Why didn't she give me a show? Why didn't the world? Why did I go broke in Seattle? Why did I take the steerage and live like a hog to Nome? Why did I go to the El Dorado? I was heading for Big Pete's and only went for matches. Why didn't I have matches? Why did I want to smoke? Don't you see? All worked out, every bit of it, all parts fitting snug. Before I was born, like as not. I'll put the sack I never hoped to get on it before I was born. That's why. That's why John Randolph passed the word and his checks in at the same time. Damn him. It served him well, right? Why didn't he keep his tongue between his teeth and give me a chance? He knew I was next to broke. Why didn't I hold my hand? Oh, why? Why? And Fortune La Pearle would roll upon the floor, vainly interrogating the scheme of things. At such outbreaks Yuri said no word, gave no sign, save that his gray eyes seemed to turn dull and muddy, as though from lack of interest. There was nothing in common between these two men, and this fact Fortune grasped sufficiently to wonder sometimes why Yuri had stood by him. But the time of waiting came to an end. Even a community's bloodlust cannot stand before its gold lust. The murder of John Randolph had already passed into the annals of the camp, and there it rested. Had the murderer appeared, the men of Nome would certainly have stopped stampeding long enough to see justice done, whereas the whereabouts of Fortune La Pearle was no longer an insistent problem. There was gold in the creek beds and ruby beaches, and when the sea opened, the men with healthy sacks would sail away to where the good things of life were sold absurdly cheap. So one night, Fortune helped Yuri Bram harness the dogs and lash the sled, and the twain took the winter trail south on the ice. But it was not all south, for they left the sea east from St. Michael's, crossed the divide, and struck the Yukon at Anvik, many hundred miles from its mouth, then on into the northeast, past Koyukuk, Tanana and Minuk, till they rounded the great curve at Fort Yukon, crossed and recrossed the Arctic Circle, and headed south through the flats. It was a weary journey, and Fortune would have wondered why the man went with him, had not Yuri told him that he owned claims and had men working at Eagle. Eagle lay on the edge of the line. A few miles farther on, the British flag waved over the barracks at Fort Cudahy. Then came Dawson, Pelly, the Five Fingers, Windy Arm, Caribou Crossing, Linderman, the Chilkoot and Dyea. On the morning after passing Eagle, they rose early. This was their last camp, and they were now to part. Fortune's heart was light. There was a promise of spring in the land, and the days were growing longer. The way was passing into Canadian territory. Liberty was at hand, the sun was returning, and each day saw him nearer to the great outside. The world was big, and he could once again paint his future in royal red. He whistled about the breakfast and hummed snatches of light song while Yuri put the dogs in harness and packed up. But when all was ready, Fortune's feet itching to be off, Yuri pulled an unused backlog to the fire and sat down. Ever hear of the Dead Horse Trail? He glanced up meditatively and Fortune shook his head, inwardly chafing at the delay. Sometimes there are meetings under circumstances which make men remember, Yuri continued, speaking in a low voice and very slowly, and I met a man under such circumstances on the Dead Horse Trail. Freighting an outfit over the White Pass in '97 broke many a man's heart, for there was a world of reason when they gave that trail its name. The horses died like mosquitoes in the first frost, and from Skagway to Bennett they rotted in heaps. They died at the rocks, they were poisoned at the summit, and they starved at the lakes. They fell off the trail, what there was of it, or they went through it. In the river they drowned under their loads or were smashed to pieces against the boulders. They snapped their legs in the crevices and broke their backs falling backwards with their packs. In the sloughs they sank from sight or smothered in the slime, and they were disemboweled in the bogs where the corduroy logs turned end up in the mud. Men shot them, worked them to death, and when they were gone went back to the beach and bought more. Some did not bother to shoot them, stripping the saddles off and the shoes and leaving them where they fell. Their hearts turned to stone, those which did not break, and they became beasts, the men on Dead Horse Trail. It was there I met a man with the heart of a Christ and the patience. And he was honest. When he rested at midday, he took the packs from the horses so that they too might rest. He paid $50 a hundredweight for their fodder and more. He used his own bed to blanket their backs when they rubbed raw. Other men let the saddles eat holes the size of water buckets. Other men, when the shoes gave out, let them wear their hoofs down to the bleeding stumps. He spent his last dollar for horseshoe nails. I know this because we slept in the one bed and ate from the one pot, and became blood brothers where men lost their grip of things and died blaspheming God. He was never too tired to ease a strap or tighten a cinch, and often there were tears in his eyes when he looked on all that waste of misery. At a passage in the rocks, where the brutes upreared hind-legged and stretched their forelegs upward like cats to clear the wall, the way was piled with carcasses where they had toppled back. And here he stood in the stench of hell, with a cheery word and a hand on the rump at the right time, till the string passed by. And when one bogged, he blocked the trail till it was clear again, nor did the man live who crowded him at such time. At the end of the trail a man who had killed 50 horses wanted to buy, but we looked at him and at our own mountain cayuses from eastern Oregon. 5,000 he offered, and we were broke, but we remembered the poison grass of the summit and the passage in the rocks, and the man who was my brother spoke no word, but divided the cayuses into 2 bunches, his in the one and mine in the other, and he looked at me and we understood each other. So he drove mine to the one side and I drove his to the other, and we took with us our rifles and shot them to the last one, while the man who had killed 50 horses cursed us till his throat cracked. But that man, with whom I welded blood brothership on the Dead Horse Trail. Why, that man was John Randolph. Fortune, sneering the while, completed the climax for him. Yuri nodded and said, "I am glad you understand." "I am ready," Fortune answered, the old weary bitterness strong in his face again. "Go ahead, but hurry." Yuri Bram rose to his feet. "I have had faith in God all the days of my life. I believe He loves justice. I believe He is looking down upon us now, choosing between us. I believe He waits to work His will through my own right arm. And such is my belief, that we will take equal chance and let Him speak His own judgment." Fortune's heart leaped at the words. He did not know much concerning Yuri's God, but he believed in chance, and chance had been coming his way ever since the night he ran down the beach and across the snow. "But there is only one gun," he objected. "We will fire turnabout," Yuri replied, at the same time throwing out the cylinder of the other man's Colt and examining it. "And the cards to decide. 1 hand of 7-Up." Fortune's blood was warming to the game, and he drew the deck from his pocket as Yuri nodded. Surely chance would not desert him now. He thought of the returning sun as he cut for deal, and he thrilled when he found the deal was his. He shuffled and dealt, and Yuri cut him the jack of spades. They laid down their hands. Yuri's was bare of trumps while he held ace deuce. The outside seemed very near to him as they stepped off the 50 paces. "If God withholds His hand and you drop me, the dogs and outfit are yours. You'll find a bill of sale already made out in my pocket," Yuri explained, facing the path of the bullet, straight and broad-breasted. Fortune shook a vision of the sun shining on the ocean from his eyes and took aim. He was very careful. Twice he lowered as the spring breeze shook the pines. But the third time he dropped on one knee, gripped the revolver steadily in both hands and fired. Yuri whirled half about, threw up his arms, swayed wildly for a moment, and sank into the snow. But Fortune knew he had fired too far to one side, else the man would not have whirled. When Yuri, mastering the flesh and struggling to his feet, beckoned for the weapon, Fortune was minded to fire again. But he thrust the idea from him. Chance had been very good to him already, he felt, and if he tricked now he would have to pay for it afterward. No, he would play fair. Besides, Yuri was hard hit, and could not possibly hold the heavy Colt long enough to draw a bead. "And where is your God now?" he taunted as he gave the wounded man the revolver. And Yuri answered, "God has not yet spoken. Prepare that he may speak." Fortune faced him, but twisted his chest sideways in order to present less surface. Yuri tottered about drunkenly but waited too, for the moment's calm between the catspaws. The revolver was very heavy, and he doubted like Fortune because of its weight. But he held it, arm extended, above his head, and then let it slowly drop forward and down. At the instant Fortune's left breast and the sight flashed into line with his eye. He pulled the trigger. Fortune did not whirl, but gay San Francisco dimmed and faded, and as the sunbright snow turned black and blacker, he breathed his last malediction on the chance he had misplayed.